Begin firing sequence. Load CD player. Increase amplification. Activate audio. Volume to maximum. Launch CD.
This is 580 WIBW. On the other hand,
You better lock the doors, turn up the radio, strap yourself in.
with your host, Raubin Pierce
Look at him, he's crazy. He's like a vicious little chihuahua thing.
and Megan Mosek.
She's got problems. Scary problems.
Call, text, or chat right now at RobinandMegan.com.
Look, I don't need this. I inhaled my favorite whistle this morning.
Now, here are Topeka's Truth Detectors, Robin and Megan.
Special guest joining us right now on the program. He is a gentleman who has been really trying to get the Kansas legislature to pay attention, to keep their eye on the ball. He's with the Kansas Policy Institute. Dave Trabert joins me on the program. Dave, how are you today?
Fine, thanks. Thanks for having me.
You're here in the capital city today.
Yes.
Are you trying to get the legislators to start breathing again after the revenues were down another 10% in the month of April?
Well, yeah, I was in testifying on HB 2748. It's a proposal that would allow schools greater flexibility to use money they have in the bank, which is aid they've received in prior years but didn't spend in those years. And it's designed to give them more flexibility to use that money so they can offset whatever losses they might have from the federal stimulus money next year instead of a job-killing tax increase.
Let's talk about you do this. You put together, especially when it comes to school funding, different ways. In fact, you've put out, Volume 3?
Yes.
Analysis of K through 12 spending in Kansas. Tell us what that is.
We went back and looked at just exactly how schools spent the money they received over the 4-year period. We went back to 2005, which is the last year before the legislature started pumping hundreds of millions of dollars more into K-12 education. We wanted to see how that money was spent from how it changed from 2005 through 2009. We did it because there is a tremendous amount of misunderstanding over how much money schools receive and how that has changed recently. What we found was some pretty remarkable increases. The per pupil, we hear a lot about how much per pupil. In fact, schools like to focus on the base state aid per pupil, which is just the starting point for a very lengthy formula that really determines how much aid schools receive. And so while people think that, based on what schools tell them, that their aid is maybe around $4,000 per pupil, the total that they spent in 2009 was, on average, $12,660 per pupil.
Wow.
That range, though, that was just the average. The range went from a low of $8,490 to a high of $31,576 per pupil. $30,000 a student. Yes.
Is that in a large school district or a small school district?
That's in a small school district. Actually,
Okay.
the 8490 was in a small school district too.
Interesting.
And what we did was look, because there's another misconception about education funding is that the Montoy Supreme Court decision really determined what it should cost to operate schools. It did no such thing. First of all, the Supreme Court had no business. They themselves violated the separation of powers doctrine in the Constitution by issuing an order of. They can decide whether something is or isn't constitutional. They are prohibited by the Constitution from instructing the legislature to do something to fix it. That's a legislative prerogative. But as that aside, the lawsuit was not about what it would cost if schools were to operate efficiently. That was supposed to be part of the study, the cost study that they used in Augenblick and Myers, but Augenblick and Myers acknowledged they decided not to look at efficiency because their explanation was that might preclude the fact that some schools are successful because they spend more money.
And that was going to be my question. Do you have a comparison between the school spending $8,000 per pupil and change, and the school spending $30,000 on test scores? I mean,
Sure.
Are the kids who were spending $30,000 on each, are they performing better?
They're really the data strongly shows which is in conjunction with a number of educational studies that have been done, is that there is no cause between higher spending and higher achievement scores. Some people believe that there is, and even the legislative post-audit study acknowledged that the educational research on this is mixed at best. And the last study that was done in Kansas by a professor who is at Kansas State University said she found no connection between higher spending and higher achievement scores.
Which seems crazy. I mean, you would think that you're going to get, if you're spending 3 times as much money, maybe you're not going to get 3 times the results, but certainly much higher results. And study after study shows that is not true.
That's not true. And it's, certainly if you start from zero, if you spend no money and then you spend some, yes, you're going to get, but it's after a point, and we're way, way beyond that point, where spending more money just doesn't do it. You have to go back and look at what are the reasons that, if you want to, you can certainly do things to increase achievement, but just spending more money is not the answer. And I'll give you some great examples here. Let me, because Kansas-owned school districts are great proof of that. Here is, let me see. Okay, for example, you have, we looked at reading scores, and we broke this down by size of enrollment in districts so that we're not comparing large districts with small districts, because we want to compare spending and achievement. So we looked at the districts with enrollment between 100 and 500 students. That happens to be the largest grouping of districts. Districts that average 90 to 99% proficiency on the reading tests. There were 66 districts, and the range of spending per pupil went from a high of $19,035 down to $10,299. That's an $8,700 per pupil difference, 85%, to get the same scores. If you look at the scores for 80 to 89% proficiency, there's an 80% difference. You can spend as little as $11,082. You can spend as much as $19,992. Every place we looked, we found that there are districts in Kansas that are getting very high achievement scores, spending thousands of dollars less than similar-sized districts.
What about larger? Because I know you're breaking them out to try and keep the school districts the same, but when you're looking, are the larger districts, when they're spending the amount of money, are they getting better scores or are they getting lower scores because there's a larger population?
They're getting, generally speaking, they're getting somewhat lower scores. But that's not surprising, and it's not really about spending. It's about the makeup of the student body, because the larger districts are naturally in the larger population centers, and that's where you tend to find higher levels of special ed students or higher levels of the at-risk students, what's considered at-risk, which is based on income level, and so they get more money to meet those students' needs. You see slightly lower test scores, but not dramatically. There is nothing in the actual spending patterns and test scores of Kansas school districts that indicates there's any connection between spending more money and getting higher achievement. In fact, we also went back and looked at what was happening to scores before all this extra money started putting in, and scores were actually growing faster before they received the several $100 million more in funding.
What do you think the